The unexpected trap. Captain David Harper stood in the dense alien jungle, sweat beading on his forehead as he carefully adjusted the settings on his small trap. The soft hum of the forest surrounded him, with strange birds calling out in the distance, and the faint rustling of alien creatures moving through the underbrush. The planet was beautiful yet terrifying. It was nothing like Earth. This was the first time humans had been allowed to explore this far out in the galaxy, and the risks were high. David had read about this planet before, the mysterious terrain, the unique ecosystem, but nothing in the reports had prepared him for how alive the place felt. The trees seemed to breathe, their massive, twisting branches moving gently in the wind, and the ground beneath his boots felt almost warm, as though it too was alive. The air smelled faintly of sweet, unfamiliar flowers and damp earth. His team had landed earlier that morning, and they had set up a base camp not far from where they had been told to begin their research. The goal was simple: observe, collect data, and return safely. But as David made his way deeper into the jungle, checking each trap he'd set for smaller, non-threatening alien creatures, he began to feel the weight of his responsibility. He was in uncharted territory, surrounded by the unknown, and there was no telling what dangers lay hidden in the shadows. The trap was designed for small creatures, those that could be safely studied. For the planet's biodiversity, it was nothing more than a simple snare, nothing that would cause harm. David had set it with care, ensuring it was hidden well beneath a cluster of alien bushes, his eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of movement. As he crouched to inspect the trap, something caught his eye, a glimmer of blue. He froze. From beneath the brush came a soft rustling sound, followed by the sudden snap of a twig. David's heart raced. He hadn't expected any large creatures to be in this area. The trap had been designed for small, harmless animals, but the rustling continued. Whatever it was bigger than a bird or small mammal. David's fingers tightened around the gun holstered on his side, but he made no move to draw it. His instincts told him to stay calm, to wait. Whatever creature had triggered the trap might be scared, and the last thing he wanted was to provoke it. The rustling stopped. David exhaled. Cautiously moving closer to the trap, he knelt and peered through the leaves. His breath caught in his throat. What he saw was beyond anything he could have imagined. A figure, no larger than a human child, was tangled in the net. It was an alien, no, a girl with smooth, glowing blue skin. Her delicate, pointed ears and sharp features suggested she was part of a species different from humans, and the faint luminescence from her skin seemed to pulse with every breath she took. She struggled against the trap, her panic growing as she realized she couldn't escape. David's mind raced. This wasn't supposed to happen. He had set the trap for harmless creatures, not intelligent beings. The alien girl's eyes were wide with terror, her breath quick and shallow as she glanced around frantically. Her body shimmered, reflecting the sunlight through the thick jungle canopy as she twisted in the snare. David stood frozen for a moment, his mind trying to process what was happening. The reports had mentioned the presence of alien life on this planet, but they had always described the creatures as passive, not aggressive. But this girl was clearly frightened. Was she alone? Was she part of a tribe or group? He took a cautious step forward, trying not to make any sudden movements. "Hey," he said softly, his voice gentle, though his throat was tight with uncertainty. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The alien girl's eyes snapped toward him, her pupils dilated in fear. She pulled harder at the snare, but it only tightened around her. She let out a small, terrified sound, and David's heart sank. It was clear she didn't understand him. She didn't even seem to recognize him as a human. All she saw was the trap and the fear that came with it. David quickly dropped to his knees in front of her, trying to stay calm. "It's okay," he repeated, reaching for the trap. "I'm going to free you." The girl let out a low, guttural sound that David couldn't place. She twisted her body harder, trying to get away, but the trap held her tight. Her movements were swift, desperate, like an animal caught in a snare. David hesitated. He needed to be careful. If she was dangerous, if she felt threatened, there was no telling how she might react. His first instinct was to release her as quickly as possible, but he didn't want to make the situation worse. He reached for the trap's release mechanism, his fingers trembling slightly as he tried to free her. "Just stay still," he whispered, trying to calm her. "I'm here to help." But the girl didn't seem to hear him. Instead, she screamed, her voice high and sharp, sending a chill down David's spine. His eyes widened in shock as the scream echoed through the jungle, loud and piercing. Her fear was palpable, and in that moment, David understood. She wasn't just trapped, she was terrified of him, terrified of being captured. David's heart pounded in his chest. He had been trained to handle unknown situations, but this was something entirely different. This wasn't just an alien creature, it was a living, breathing being, and her fear was now the only thing he could focus on. "Please," David said, voice cracking with sincerity. I'm not going to hurt you, I promise, but in the back of his mind, a thought began to creep in. What if she thinks I'm going to eat her? The question lingered in the air, unanswered, as the girl struggled desperately in the trap, her fear growing with every passing second. Asterisk, the misunderstanding alien girl continued to thrash in the trap, her body glowing in the sunlight as she pulled harder and harder, her desperate movements causing the snare to tighten further. David's hands shook as he worked frantically to release her, but her panic seemed to be escalating by the second. Her fearful eyes locked onto his, wide with terror, her mouth opening in a silent scream. She wasn't just afraid of the trap, she was afraid of him. David's heart ached as he watched her struggle. It was clear she didn't understand his words. And even more so, it seemed as though she had no clue who he was or what he was doing here. She just saw a strange human, someone who, in her mind, could very well be another threat, someone who had trapped her and who was now coming closer. Hey, it's okay, David whispered urgently, his voice gentle as he tried to reach for the release mechanism again. His mind was racing. Why was she so terrified? Did she think he was a predator? He paused for a second, the thought dawning on him. Could she think I'm going to eat her? The sheer thought hit him like a ton of bricks. The alien girl wasn't just scared of being trapped, she was terrified of being harmed. What if her species had a history with humans, where they were hunted or captured for food? Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The way she shrank away from him, her eyes wide with terror, it was the same reaction an animal would have if it was caught by a predator. The realization made David feel sick to his stomach. He had been so focused on his mission, on exploration, on data collection, that he had failed to consider how his very presence could be seen as dangerous. The girl's breathing quickened as she continued to struggle, her glowing skin flickering with every movement. David's mind spun as he quickly realized that every move he made was only making her more afraid. She was seeing a predator, a threat, and he was only reinforcing that belief by getting closer to her. His instincts told him to calm her down, to stop the struggle before it escalated further. He had no idea if this alien species was capable of speech like humans, but he had to try something. Anything to make her understand that he meant no harm. Slowly, David lowered his hands, backing away from the trap for a moment, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. He tried to make himself appear smaller, less threatening. I'm not going to hurt you, he said softly, though the words felt too heavy, too foreign. He wasn't sure if she could even comprehend him, but he needed to try. I just want to help, asterisk. To his surprise, the girl stopped struggling for a brief moment. Her body froze, her glowing eyes flickering in his direction as if she were sizing him up. The tension in the air thickened as she cautiously watched him, her breath shallow. David's heart pounded in his chest. Had he made progress? Was she beginning to understand? But the moment of calm was short-lived. Her eyes flickered to the surroundings and then back to him. Suddenly, she let out a sharp, guttural cry, her eyes wide and filled with fear as she yanked herself forward again, desperately pulling at the snare with all her strength. She shrieked again, this time louder and more frantic, as if to warn him. David immediately recoiled, his mind flooded with confusion. What had he done wrong? Why was she still so terrified? Then it hit him, her screams, they weren't just for her own survival. The alien girl was trying to warn someone. She wasn't alone. Her cries echoed through the jungle, carrying the unmistakable sound of distress. David could feel it in his bones. Something was coming, and it wasn't something he was ready for. The girl's fear wasn't just for herself, it was a signal to others. Perhaps a warning that humans were enemies, that he was a threat. She wasn't afraid because he'd trapped her, she was afraid because, in her mind, he was part of a long-standing history of terror. She was terrified not just for her life, but for what might come next, whatever horror she had heard about humans and their treatment of her kind. David looked around frantically. Her shrieks were growing louder and the forest around them suddenly felt much less safe. He could hear the faint rustling of movement in the distance, something large, something fast. His pulse quickened. A cold realization crept over him. He wasn't just dealing with a scared alien girl. He had unknowingly become part of something much larger, something that was now coming for him. His mind raced. He needed to act fast. If she was part of a group, or if there were others like her, this could quickly escalate into something deadly. He was alone, his team far behind, and this alien girl, no matter how fearful she was now his only ally. Please, David begged, his voice low and urgent. I don't want to hurt you. Let me help you, please. The girl's frantic movement slowed for a split second. The hesitation was enough for David to reach out cautiously and try to release the trap one more time. But just as he was about to undo the snare, a shadow shifted in the trees behind him. David's blood ran cold. Suddenly, the underbrush rustled violently, and something large and fast charged toward him. He spun around just in time to see massive, glowing eyes locked on him. the creature was unlike anything he'd ever seen. A terrifying, hulking figure with muscular limbs and sharp claws. It roared, a deep, bone-chilling sound that echoed through the jungle, shaking the very ground beneath David's feet. The girl's warning had been too late. She had been trying to save him, but now it was too late. The unexpected David's heart pounded as the massive creature charged at him, its glowing eyes fixed on his face. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. Its body was a mix of organic and alien technology, a terrifying blend of power and aggression. Its claws scraped against the jungle floor as it closed in on him, the ground shaking with each step it took. The alien girl's terrified scream still echoed in his mind as he tried to assess the situation, knowing that whatever this creature was, it didn't care who he was. In an instant, David's instincts kicked in. He didn't have time to think. He grabbed for the gun strapped to his side. But before he could draw it, the girl still trapped in the snare let out another deafening shriek. The creature, a massive beast of fur and muscle, stopped in its tracks, its glowing eyes narrowing as it hesitated. The air between them seemed to shift, as if the creature was unsure whether to attack him or the girl. David's mind raced. Could the alien girl have some kind of control over this beast? Was she communicating with it in some way? She had screamed just moments ago, but now, the creature was watching her, waiting for some kind of signal before David could even contemplate his next move. The girl spoke, her voice shaking, but strong, the words almost inaudible. It was a strange, guttural sound, completely unlike human speech. She said something again, louder this time, and to his surprise, the creature seemed to respond. It lowered its massive head, as if recognizing her command. David blinked in disbelief. The girl's fear seemed to ease, and the creature, still watching her with suspicion, took a few cautious steps backward. It was as if it had been given an order, a command that it obeyed without hesitation. What the hell? David muttered, stepping back cautiously as he watched the creature's every move. His gun was still in his hand, but he felt it was no longer the weapon that would save him. The alien girl, still trapped in the snare, had just made an impossible connection with this monster. It was like watching a dangerous beast be tamed by the calm presence of a child. The world seemed to slow as he realized the alien girl was, in fact, communicating with the creature. The creature, though still massive and intimidating, seemed to calm slightly, its glowing eyes flickering as it turned its gaze back to the girl. It was no longer in attack mode. Its posture had relaxed, though it still remained watchful and alert. The girl gave one more quiet command, and after a tense moment, the creature turned and disappeared into the thick jungle, with a final growl, vanishing like a shadow among the trees. David stood there, speechless, his breath coming in short gasps. He had no idea what had just happened, but one thing was clear: the alien girl had saved his life. Somehow, her connection to this creature, whatever it was, had given her the power to control it. He looked down at her, still struggling in the trap. There was a new layer of respect in his eyes as he bent down and carefully began to release her. You just saved my life," David said, his voice shaking from the adrenaline. The alien girl didn't respond immediately. Her eyes were still wide with caution, but there was something different now, a subtle shift in her gaze. She watched David, no longer with the fear that had defined their first encounter, but with a quiet curiosity. Her eyes flickered to the jungle around them, then back to David. You're not going to eat me?" she asked, her voice still soft but no longer trembling with fear. Her accent was strange, the words alien to his ears, but he understood. The question she asked lingered in the air, and for the first time, David felt a deep wave of guilt and confusion. "No," he replied firmly, his hands still shaking slightly as he freed her from the trap. "I'm not going to eat you. I never would." The girl's eyes softened, though they remained cautious. "Why did you trap me?" she asked, her voice still wary but not as fearful as before. "Humans are hunters. We have heard the stories." David paused, the weight of her words sinking in. The stories. He had heard them too, but he had never imagined how they might be shaped by the alien perspective, how the actions of a few humans could cast shadows over the entire species. He had thought of the trap as a simple tool to catch small creatures, not realizing that to her, it might have been a symbol of the long-standing mistrust between their people. "I didn't mean to trap you," he said softly, looking her in the eyes. I didn't know. I didn't know your people were afraid of humans because of what happened in the past. I'm sorry." The girl was silent for a moment, her glowing skin flickering faintly as she processed his words. Her gaze softened, and David could see the walls of fear slowly starting to crack. "The past is a shadow we cannot ignore," she said quietly, her voice like a whisper carried by the wind. "But it is not who we are now." David nodded slowly, realizing just how much he had misunderstood. This girl, this alien, she wasn't just a creature to be studied. She was a being with her own history, her own fears, and her own strength, and somehow, against all odds, they had found each other. There was a long road ahead of them, but maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something new. "I'm not your enemy," David said, his voice steady. "And I don't want to be. I want to help, if you let me." The girl studied him for a long time, her glowing eyes never leaving his face. For a moment, there was no movement, no sound. Just the two of them, an unlikely pair, caught between fear and understanding. And then, slowly, she nodded. "You will need to prove it," she said, her voice calm, but there was a glimmer of trust in her eyes. "But for now, you are not my enemy." David exhaled, a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. This was just the beginning, and the road ahead would be complicated, filled with uncertainties. But for the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope. They were no longer enemies, they were something else, something more. And in that moment, David realized that the true challenge wasn't just surviving, it was understanding. A shifting trust. As the alien girl slowly stepped away from the trap, she gave David a long, cautious look. Her glowing skin flickered softly in the dimming light of the jungle, and her eyes, once full of terror, now carried a trace of curiosity. Despite the events that had unfolded, there was a stillness between them, an unspoken understanding. David felt an unusual weight in his chest as he stood up, watching her. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were at the beginning of something monumental, something that had the potential to change everything. Yet he knew that trust couldn't be built in a moment. They were still standing on shaky ground, both trying to understand each other in a world so vastly different from their own. "Do you have a name?" David asked, breaking the silence. His voice was gentle, careful not to push too hard. He wanted to learn, to communicate, but he didn't want to come across as invasive. The alien girl hesitated, her eyes narrowing slightly as she studied him. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, in the same soft voice, she finally answered, I am called Arya." David nodded, trying to remember the name, repeating it quietly to himself. "Arya," he said, trying it out. It sounded strange to his ears, foreign, but he liked it. There was power in its strength and a softness that came with the girl herself. "I'm David," he said, his voice warm as he offered her a small, tentative smile. For a brief moment, Arya looked at him as if she were trying to gauge whether his smile was genuine or simply a tool of manipulation. Her gaze softened ever so slightly before she turned her attention to the surrounding jungle. The air was thick with the sounds of alien creatures, chirping and rustling in the underbrush. Yet the silence between them felt profound, like the entire world was holding its breath. "I should leave," she said suddenly, her voice betraying a hint of uncertainty. "You do not belong here. You should not be here." David's brow furrowed. "Why not? I came here to explore, to learn. I didn't mean to hurt you or anyone. I didn't know about the stories, about what happened." Arya's eyes flickered with a distant sadness. "Stories are passed down for a reason. We do not forget. The humans who came before you, they are the ones who made us fear. They are the reason my people live in the shadows, hiding from those like you." David swallowed hard, the guilt settling heavily in his stomach. The thought that humans had driven an entire species to such fear, to such distrust, weighed on him like a stone. He had always believed in peace, in exploration, but never had he considered the consequences of his species' actions in a broader context. "I never meant for any of this to happen," David said quietly. "I want to fix it. I want to help. Please give me a chance to show you that not all humans are like the ones who hurt you." For a long time, Arya didn't respond. She stood still, her glowing form like a statue in the fading light of the jungle, her head slightly tilted as she considered his words. David took a careful step toward her, wanting to offer her something that might begin to bridge the chasm of distrust that lay between them. But as he moved closer, Arya held up a hand, a silent command for him to stop. "I cannot trust you," she said, the words firm and unyielding. "Not yet." David's heart sank at her words, but he didn't let the disappointment show. Instead, he nodded, accepting her stance. "I understand, but I'm here for as long as it takes." Arya didn't speak for a long while. The forest was still, almost unnaturally so, and David could feel the weight of the jungle's gaze on them. Then, finally, Arya spoke again, her voice quieter this time. "You are brave, David, I can see that, but bravery alone does not make a friend." "I know," David replied, "but I'll show you that I can be more than just brave. I can be trustworthy." The girl looked at him for a moment longer, her alien eyes softening, the glow in them dimming as she seemed to come to a decision. "I will show you my world," she said, almost reluctantly, "but you must understand, I will guide you, but only as far as I am willing. Do not push me further than I am ready." David gave a small nod, feeling a glimmer of hope. He wasn't sure what Arya meant by guiding him through her world, but he knew that this was a step forward, a step toward breaking down the walls of distrust. It was the first real moment of connection they'd had since the trap had been set. And despite the uncertainty, David could feel a shift. "I won't push you, Arya, I promise." She glanced at him once more, her expression unreadable, before turning toward the jungle path. Without another word, she began walking, her steps light and sure. David hesitated for a moment, then followed, keeping a respectful distance behind her. He had no idea where she was leading him, but he felt a strange sense of trust in his chest. As they walked deeper into the alien jungle, the world around them seemed to shift. The trees grew taller, their bark glowing faintly as they entered a dense part of the forest. David could feel the temperature drop as they passed through an archway of twisting vines, and the sounds of the creatures grew quieter. The atmosphere here was different, more alive, almost as if the very jungle itself was watching them. "I'm taking you to my people," Arya said over her shoulder, her voice steady but laced with a slight tension. "You will meet them, but know this, you will not be welcomed by all. Many still remember the old ways. Many still fear your kind." David nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. He was about to step into a world of unknowns, into a community that had been shaped by fear and mistrust, but there was a part of him that believed, deep down, that this was where it all began. He had no idea what would happen, but he was ready to face whatever came next. Asterisk into the heart of the unknown path through the jungle grew denser with each step. The towering trees closing in like silent sentinels, the air seemed to thicken, heavy with the scent of unfamiliar plants and the subtle hum of alien insects. David followed Arya in silence, his heart pounding with anticipation, a mix of awe and nervousness. He was about to meet the very people who had been hiding from humans for so long, people who, by all accounts, feared him and his kind. Arya moved with an ease that came from familiarity, her steps light on the soft earth. Every now and then, she would glance back at him, her expression unreadable. Her glowing skin flickered as the shadows of the jungle swallowed them whole, her presence a stark contrast to the darkening environment. Despite her earlier reluctance to trust him, she was guiding him deeper into the heart of her world, into a place he had no idea existed. David's mind raced with questions. What would he find when they reached her people? Would they greet him with the same hostility and fear that Arya had shown when they first met? Or would he find something more, something beyond the ancient wounds of his species' past? He had to admit, he wasn't entirely sure he was ready for what lay ahead. He had come here with a mission to explore, to gather data. But he quickly realized that he was facing something far more important than scientific discovery. He was facing the chance to make amends for humanity's past, to rebuild a bridge that had been shattered long before he arrived. The sounds of the jungle around them began to fade as Arya led him through a small clearing. The air grew noticeably cooler, the ground beneath them softer. David looked around, and for the first time, he saw what Arya had been leading him to. It was a village, a small settlement nestled in the heart of the jungle. Unlike anything he had ever seen, the structures were made of materials David couldn't identify: twisted vines, bioluminescent plants, and glowing stones that seemed to hum with energy. It was a place that felt ancient, yet incredibly alive, as if it had been crafted with the very essence of the planet itself. The entire village seemed to pulse with a quiet, peaceful rhythm, its existence blending seamlessly with the natural world around it. As they entered the village, David could feel the eyes of the inhabitants upon them. The villagers, tall and graceful, with glowing markings across their skin, moved through the streets with an eerie calm. Some stopped to stare at David, their expressions cautious but not hostile. Others continued with their daily routines, as if human visitors were a rare but not unheard of occurrence. Arya led him toward the center of the village, where a large gathering space awaited. There, a group of elder figures stood waiting. They were larger than the others, their bodies adorned with intricate patterns that glowed softly in the dim light. Their eyes were wise, ancient even, and their gaze met David's with a sense of weight and authority that made him feel small in comparison. As they approached, Arya turned to David. "These are the elders," she said quietly, her voice carrying an edge of uncertainty. "They are the keepers of our history, and they are the ones who decide whether we welcome outsiders." David swallowed hard, knowing this moment would define everything. This was at the point of no return. If they rejected him, there would be no going back. He would be forced to leave, to carry the knowledge of his people's cruelty in his heart forever. But if they accepted him, if they trusted him, it could be the beginning of something new. He took a deep breath, preparing himself for whatever was to come. The eldest of the group, a tall figure with silver-white hair and a cloak made of shimmering, translucent fibers, stepped forward. The elder's eyes gleamed with an intensity that made David shiver. She regarded him for a long moment before speaking, her voice deep and filled with centuries of wisdom. "Human," she said, her tone neutral but powerful. "We have heard the stories. Stories of your kind, of your people. Many of those stories are not kind, but you." She paused, studying David closely. "You are not like the others, you are different. Why have you come?" David took a step forward, his voice steady. As he met the elder's gaze, "I came to understand, I came to make things right. I never wanted to be part of the stories of fear and violence. I want to prove to you, to all of you, that not all humans are the same. I want to show you that we can be trusted." The elder's expression softened slightly, but there was no smile, just an inscrutable look that seemed to weigh him down, as though she was measuring him not just with her eyes, but with her entire being. "Your words mean nothing unless you can prove them," she replied, her voice carrying the weight of ancient authority. "Trust is not given freely here, you will have to earn it." David's chest tightened as he realized what was being asked of him. It wasn't just a matter of speaking the right words. It wasn't even about demonstrating knowledge or understanding. It was about something far deeper. He had to prove his sincerity, his willingness to change, and to understand the true consequences of humanity's past actions, and that, he knew, would take time. The elder turned to the others, and the villagers gathered around, forming a circle. David watched as the village's energy shifted, becoming more focused, more alert. The elder spoke again, but this time her words were directed at the crowd. "Let us see if his actions match his words," she said, her voice like the wind through the trees. "Let us see if he can truly be trusted." Without warning, a few of the villagers stepped forward. They were tall and imposing, and David could see the caution in their eyes as they approached him. They weren't hostile, at least not yet, but there was no doubt in his mind that he was being judged. He could feel their eyes on him, their silent assessment of his character, of his worthiness to stand in their presence. The elder nodded, signaling for the test to begin. "Your actions will decide your fate here. Prove that you are not the monster of the stories. Prove that you can be trusted." David felt the weight of the moment settle over him. This was more than a test of words, it was a test of everything he had believed about his species, about himself. He had no idea what the villagers expected of him, but he knew this was his only chance. And so, as the villagers gathered around him, David steeled himself, knowing that whatever came next, it was up to him to prove he wasn't like the others. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the past was not going to let them go easily. But perhaps, just perhaps, he could change the future. The trial of trust there in the village square had thickened, and the atmosphere was now charged with a quiet intensity. The villagers gathered in a semicircle around David, their eyes fixed on him with unwavering focus. It felt as if the entire village was holding its breath, waiting for the first sign of whether he would rise to the challenge or fall short. The elder's words echoed in David's mind: "Prove you can be trusted, prove you are not the monster of the stories." He had expected to be challenged in some way, but nothing had prepared him for this. The weight of their eyes was like a physical pressure, each gaze measuring, assessing, dissecting every part of him. It wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about understanding, about showing his willingness to truly change the way his species had been seen by these people for centuries. The first villager stepped forward. It was a tall, muscular figure, with glowing patterns running along their arms and face. There was a quiet authority in the way they moved, their body language radiating confidence and a sense of quiet power. This wasn't a confrontation, but a challenge, one that David wasn't sure he was ready for. The villager stopped just a few feet away from him, their gaze unwavering. They raised one hand, palm open, and David instinctively mimicked the gesture. Unsure of what it meant, the villager's eyes flickered for a moment. Then they slowly closed their hand into a fist. The glow from their skin seemed to pulse with an inner rhythm, and David could feel a sudden pressure in the air around them. It was like a test, a silent command to see how he would react. For a split second, David felt the urge to reach for his weapon to defend himself. But something told him that doing so would break everything. This was a test of trust, of whether he would fall into the instinct to protect himself or rise above it. The elder's voice broke the tension, low and steady. "This is our way. We see beyond the surface. If you truly seek peace, you must show us your heart." David swallowed hard, his throat dry. He couldn't believe this was happening. There was no battle to fight, no weapon to draw. This was about exposing his humanity, his flaws, his fears, in showing that he was not like the humans who had come before him. He slowly lowered his hand, stepping forward with the same cautious resolve. His voice was quiet but steady. "I don't have the answers. I'm not perfect. I'm just trying to do the right thing. Please let me prove it." The villager standing before him didn't respond immediately. Instead, they took a step closer, their glowing skin now casting a soft light over David's face. There was a long pause, and for a moment he wondered if he had failed, but then the villager nodded slightly, a subtle movement that barely registered. But it was enough. Without another word, the villager stepped back and another moved forward. This time, it was a smaller figure, not as tall but just as commanding. They didn't speak. But instead, they extended a hand, palm up, in an invitation. Their gesture was not threatening, but one of request. Show me that you are what you say you are. Asterisk. David hesitated for only a moment. He had never been in a situation like this on Earth. Gestures of peace or friendship were often accompanied by words that could be twisted, misunderstood. Here, however, it seemed like actions spoke louder than anything else. He stepped forward slowly, his own hand trembling as he extended it to meet theirs. The moment their hands touched, an electric current surged through him. It wasn't painful, but it was intense, like something inside him was being pulled in a direction he hadn't anticipated. It was as though the alien had just linked into something deep within him, something raw. It was a connection beyond words, beyond logic. And then the world shifted. Images flashed in David's mind, images of the alien world, of a history long buried in pain and mistrust. He saw the alien civilization in its prime, peaceful and vibrant. But then it was consumed by the arrival of humans who came not as explorers, but as conquerors. The images showed humans hunting his people, capturing them, taking them away. He felt their fear, their anger, their hopelessness, and then, just as quickly, he saw the alien people pulling back into the shadows, hiding, running, always running. David staggered back, gasping for air as the images faded. He blinked rapidly, trying to clear his head. The villager who had touched him stood still, their eyes calm, as if they had shared the very same memories. There was no judgment in their gaze, only understanding. The elder's voice came again, this time softer. Now you understand. This is our history. The stories you hear are not just stories, they are the truth. Can you still stand before us, knowing what your people have done? David's heart thudded in his chest. The weight of the past was heavy, so heavy that it felt like it could crush him. The alien people had endured so much, and the human species had been part of the violence. How could he possibly ask them to forgive? How could he justify what had been done in the name of exploration? He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. I understand, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I can't change what happened, but I promise I'll do everything I can to make sure it doesn't happen again. I don't want to be part of the past. I want to build something different, something better. The elder studied him for a long moment. The air between them was thick, charged with the weight of everything David had just witnessed. Then, slowly, the elder nodded. Words mean little here, but your actions will speak louder than anything. The challenge was not over, but in that moment, David realized that his journey wasn't just about learning from the aliens. It was about learning from his own mistakes and proving with every step that he was ready to face the truth of his species' past. Only then could he begin to build the bridge that would unite them. Asterisk. A new path forward. Tension in the air seemed to shift. The glowing markings on the villagers' bodies flickered with an almost imperceptible rhythm, their watchful eyes still fixed on David. It was as though the very essence of the village was waiting for his next move, as if the weight of their decision lay entirely on his shoulders. David stood in the center of the circle, his hands still slightly trembling from the overwhelming connection he had just experienced. The shared vision, the pain, the fear, the betrayal lingered in his mind like a heavy cloud. He could still feel the pulse of that ancient pain running through his veins, a constant reminder of the scars left by his people's past. But now, as the villagers observed him, he could feel something different stirring inside him. The guilt, while still heavy, began to give way to something else, a resolve, a desire to do better. He had learned enough today to understand that the past could never be erased, but it could be acknowledged, and through acknowledgement, perhaps, they could begin to heal. Arya stood quietly beside him, her eyes watching him with a newfound understanding, though there was still caution in her gaze. David realized that her trust was still fragile, like a thread that could snap at any moment. This wasn't just about gaining the trust of the elders. This was about gaining the trust of the entire alien race, and he knew that the road ahead would be long, filled with challenges that could easily tear apart the fragile peace that had begun to form. The elder who had spoken earlier, the one with the silver-white hair, stepped forward once again. Her presence was commanding yet gentle, her eyes radiating wisdom that had been honed over centuries. She looked at David for a long time, her gaze piercing, as if she were searching for something beyond the surface of his words and actions. You have seen our truth, the elder said, her voice low but resonant. You have felt the weight of our history, but you are not the first to come to us with promises. Many humans have come, bearing words of peace, only to betray us in the end. What makes you different? David swallowed hard, the weight of the question pressing on him. He had no easy answer, no perfect solution, but the truth was, he had to make them believe him. He had to show them that he was different, that he could be trusted, not just by words but by actions. Actions that would prove he was willing to fight for this new path. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, David said, his voice steady. Despite the weight on his shoulders, I'm asking for a chance. A chance to prove that I can be trusted, that humanity can be trusted. I can't change the past, but I can change what happens next. I want to be part of something new, something better. The elder regarded him silently for a moment, then, as if making a decision that was both monumental and personal, she nodded once. Words are easy, she said, actions are what matter. The village fell into a profound silence. David felt the gravity of the elder's words and the responsibility they carried. It wasn't enough to simply stand there and speak. He would need to demonstrate his willingness to walk this new path, to act with integrity and compassion, actions that would speak louder than any promise. The elder turned to the others, and with a gesture of her hand, they all began to move in unison. David was unsure of what was happening, but he sensed the shift. The village, which had watched him with caution and distrust, now seemed to be moving toward something. Toward him, toward a future they would build together. Without a word, Arya stepped closer to him. She looked up at him with a quiet determination in her eyes. There was no longer the fear that had defined their first meeting. Now it was something else, something David couldn't name. But it was there. The walls she had built around herself had started to crack, just as the walls he had built had begun to crumble. We must go to the heart of the grove, Arya said, her voice steady but filled with an unspoken weight. It is where the elders test those who wish to prove themselves. David blinked in confusion. Test me? What do you mean? Arya looked at him, her glowing eyes flickering with a strange light. The heart of the grove is sacred. It is where our people go to confront their deepest fears, to face the truths they have been running from. To truly be accepted by our people, you must pass this trial. You must prove that you can face your past and the future you wish to build. Only then will we know that you are not just another human who will bring more pain. David felt his chest tighten. The thought of confronting his own past, of standing before the alien people and acknowledging the darkness in humanity's history. It was overwhelming, but there was no turning back now. He had come this far, and if he truly wanted to change the future, he had no choice but to face the trial. I'm ready, David said, his voice more certain than he felt. Whatever it takes. Arya gave him a small nod, and for the first time, a hint of trust flickered in her gaze. She led the way, her steps confident as she moved toward the heart of the village. David followed, his mind racing with questions. What would the trial entail? Would he be forced to confront the atrocities humans had committed? Or would it be something deeper, something more personal? As they moved deeper into the village, past the glowing structures and the watchful eyes of the villagers, David couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. This was his chance to prove that he wasn't like the humans who had come before him. His chance to prove that the future didn't have to be defined by the mistakes of the past. And as they reached the center of the village, where the heart of the grove awaited, David knew that this was where everything would change. The trial had begun.